The Stanford prison experiment is one of the most famous psychological experiments in American history. Conducted in 1971 by researchers Philip Zimbardo, Craig Haney, W. Curtis Banks, and David Jaffe, it sought to explore the psychological effects of prison for both prisoners and guards. Zimbardo wanted to test his hypothesis. The inherent personality traits of prisoners and guards are the chief cause of abusive behavior in prison. From his own archives, Zimbardo had written, on a quiet Sunday morning in August, in Palo Alto, California, a police car swept through the town, picking up college students as a part of a mass arrest for violation of penal codes, armed robbery, and burglary. Suspects were picked up at their homes, charged, given their legal rights, spread-eagled against the police car, searched and handcuffed. Often as surprised and curious neighbors looked on. Each suspect was put in the rear of the police car and carried off to the police station, the sirens wailing. These suspects were really just volunteers, a group of 24 college boys in the Stanford University area that during the summer of 1971 were offered $15 an hour for participating in a psychological study. When the boys were taken to the prison, the group was divided in half, with half becoming guards and half becoming prisoners. Almost as soon as the experiment started, guards and prisoners had assumed their new roles and immediately started treating each other differently. Guards began mistreating inmates, which is often cited as the main ethical concern of the study. The inmates were also subjected to psychological torment by the guards. Researcher Philip Zimbardo attempted to make his experiment as realistic as possible, even asking prison consultant Carlo Prescott what real prisons were like and what it was like to be a prisoner. He installed video cameras and recorded the results as the experiment went on, so that guards and prisoners were both under constant surveillance. He converted the basement into a replica of a real prison, installing cell doors, an intercom system for speaking to the prisoners, and created a space, which became known as the Hole, which served as the space for solitary confinement. When it comes to ethics, the experiment today can be seen as very unethical and unsafe in a few cases. Prisoners suffered multiple health issues due to stress, with some even having seizures and stress rashes. The experiment participation agreement stated that prisoners would be led to believe that they cannot leave, except for emergency reasons. The guards had no professional training, so they acted how they wanted, often emotionally abusive. Visitors, such as parents, were allowed to see the prisoners, and some of them were upset by how their boys were very fatigued or distressed due to their situation. Prisoners were often stripped, deloused, humiliated, sleep deprived, and made to use the lavatory in buckets, as well as forced to do push ups as punishment. After the experiment had occurred for a few days, some of the boys' parents talked to Zimbardo and wanted a lawyer so they could get their sons out of the prison. Zimbardo saw that the experiment was getting out of hand and decided to end it early because he saw it as no longer an experiment. It had instead devolved into a potentially dangerous situation that wasn't going to yield any results that were worth the risk. He stopped the experiment after 6 days. Then, he got the guards and prisoners together so that they could talk about their feelings out in the open and recount their own observations to try and mend any problems that the guards and prisoners had with each other, and in one case, a prisoner to prisoner dispute. Zimbardo said, at this point it became clear that we had to end this experiment. We had to do so because it was no longer an experiment. We had indeed created a prison in which people were suffering, in which some boys called prisoners were withdrawing, becoming isolated and behaving in pathological ways. Zimbardo wanted to answer another question. How can we begin to change our real institutions so that they promote human values rather than destroy them? He concluded that the perceived situation, and not personality traits, caused participants' behaviors, so his original hypothesis was incorrect. There were a number of questions that Zimbardo asked his subjects after this experiment, such as how they felt after living in that environment, or how they felt when they were being arrested, and others having to do with the behavior of other people around them. Hopefully you found this presentation informative. The links to each resource website are at the end of the slideshow. Thanks.